You've gotten tired of listening to me talk already, so I'm going to turn things over to Michael Faison, Executive Director of the Idaho Commission on the Arts, for our first presentation. Michael?
Thanks, Eric. The Idaho Commission on the Arts executed a partnership with the State Board of Education in Idaho that was called Expanding Arts Access in Rural Public Schools. We did this in spring of 2022. Now, together, the Idaho Commission on the Arts and the State Board of Education implemented a one-time grant opportunity to provide funding to rural Idaho school districts and rural public charter schools in Idaho to support rural arts education curricular capital needs. Out of 118 rural school districts and public charter schools, 71 eligible applications were received. All of those eligible applications were fully funded at their full request amounts for a total of about $1 million. And the funded projects included purchases and repair of music instruments, computers and imaging software, photography equipment software, paints, brushes, easels, throwing wheels, even an outbuilding for a new kiln to safely house that kiln. Now, legislative approval for that partnership was granted in mid-March of 2022, and the grants were issued by early June of 2022. So from beginning to end, it actually only took us 3 months to accomplish this. It's actually kind of amazing. It was successful because of the interagency partnership was built on years of attention to the relationships between the people in these agencies. And that is my ongoing theme here. It's about building the relationships of trust. Those relationships were not political gamesmanship. They never have been, and they're not going to be. They're honest, they're human, and they're real. As such, over time, they've engendered trust between our various agencies. And as we all know here, if you trust the messenger, you'll trust the message. Over the years, we've jealously guarded our agency's reputation for being competent, reliable, and easy to work with. When peers or authorizers see us walking up a hall, we want them to get a warm, fuzzy feeling. We don't want them to say, eek, run away. We want them to say, ah, here they come. So when this opportunity arose and the governor sought ways to support the state's infrastructure with one-time budget surplus funds, our agency liaison in the governor's office, Mackenzie, whose husband is an art teacher, thought of the arts education infrastructure and then thought of us to help. But we're not proprietary, so we knew that the legislature were more likely to fund this if it went through the State Board of Education rather than the State Arts Agency. So we all mutually agreed to host it there at the State Board. But the State Board doesn't actually make grants. They really didn't have a way to implement this. So we offered to do the work. The State Board would receive the appropriation and we would run the grant process. And who's the State Board's chief fiscal officer? Well, none other than a man named Gideon, who formerly was a budget analyst in the governor's budget office and was formerly assigned to our agency. And he's somebody we have a long, close relationship with. In fact, he and his wife are actually both dancers. Now, because we had built and maintained this personal relationship with Gideon over years' time, even though he had left his assignment with us, he still had a good feeling about us and he trusted us. His trust paved the way so that the state board leadership trusted us to build and implement a high-profile grant program on their behalf that had to be implemented very, very fast. Our agency is also in the executive offices of the governor. We always follow the governor's policies and directives. We never do end runs and we never surprise him. Because we have that kind of reputation with the governor's office, with the previous administration and the current administration, and remember, there are civil servants who spanned administrations too, who remember this. The governor approved the supplemental appropriation for this project in his budget without any fuss, any muss. But next, we also needed to maintain a relationship with the other key education stakeholder, and this is the Idaho State Department of Education. Why isn't the department involved in it in the beginning? Well, they're not in the governor's budget. They have their own constitutional officer. But we did not want to leave them on the sidelines. That would have just been a bad idea. So even if their appropriation was outside of the governor's budget, we engaged the Arts and Humanities Coordinator at the State Department of Education, Rebecca, who used to be our Arts Education Program Director. So Rebecca helped us to select grant panelists and assisted to define review criteria, and then helped us get the word out to the schools. And then finally, in constant consultation with the governor's office, the state board and our agency defined eligibility. We set timelines, wrote the guidelines, generated fields for grant review, created the review criteria, all within weeks. And how was it done very quickly in that way? Well, it's the near constant open communications that were going back and forth, parsing, wordsmithing, writing, rewriting, and finally coming to a consensus on everything. But in general, we deferred to them on policy intent. They deferred to us on being able to articulate that policy through the guidelines. Again, they don't make grant programs, we do. Then it had to go to my staff for implementation. Now, my agency staff are very, very good at their jobs, but they are human beings. So I had to give them a heads up as early as humanly possible so that they could mentally prepare to prioritize the workflow that would be coming and that could become overwhelming if not carefully managed. After all, we do, as just about everybody on this call has, ongoing grant programs. And we even had the prospect of an additional one-time grant program, the issuing of ARPA grants that spring if the legislature was going to approve them. So our staff, and by the way, our staff were also participating in the testing and the rollout of the state's new financial and personnel management system, God help us. That is a seriously heavy lift for our staff and staffs across state government. But in mid-March, the legislature approved the supplemental appropriation. My staff at that point worked like fiends to build the application forms, publish the materials, publicize them to reach the rural school districts, and the state board and state departments of education both helped us to get the word out. My staff managed the entire application process from receipt and troubleshooting of applications to panel operations to preparation of recommendations for the State Board of Education before their necessary early May board meeting at which they had to approve the grants to get them out the door before the end of the fiscal year. My staff even managed their public meeting notifications and public posting of meeting minutes, all which are required in Idaho state law, even for our grant panels. Our staff did everything. And then finally, right there at the beginning of May, we submitted the funding recommendations to the State Board of Education on time and in good order. And the state board approved those recommendations immediately because they trusted our process. And they cut the checks within weeks after that, again, because they trusted that everything had been done correctly throughout the process. And therefore, these were legitimate grant payments. Finally, we pledged to receive and review and deliver to the SBE the final grant reports next spring, which we will do. All of this was possible because we had cultivated relationships over years' time, and those came home to roost for us. I just hope that next time they give us a little bit more time to do this, if there's a next time. By the way, our team, in addition to all of these arts education grants and our normal grant making, did in fact receive legislative approval to issue ARPA grants this spring. And again, they worked like fiends, and they got the last ARPA grant out the door, out of the state treasury on June 30th. And so I'm going to leave this with saying, if I were to peek around the corner to my grants manager's cubicle right now and ask, "Oh, JD, I have a new task," she'd just glare at me and say, "No, just no, forget it." So that's the news from Idaho. And I look forward to answering any questions upcoming. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. That seems like a heavy lift in a short amount of time based off of a strong foundation. So it's amazing that you and your staff were able to accomplish all of that so quickly. Next up, we have Jennifer. Jennifer Allen-Barron is from the Arts Education Director for the Oklahoma Arts Council. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about what they've been doing in Oklahoma. Jennifer.
All right, hello, Eric, and thank you, everyone, for attending this. Let's see, there's our lovely logo. Next slide, please. So my name is Jennifer Allen-Barron. As Eric mentioned, I am the Arts Education Director here, and I've been at this agency for a little over 8 years. Throughout this time, I've been working with alternative education sites for pretty much my whole tenure here, but our agency has been working with alternative education for nearly 30 years. Today, I'm going to walk through how this partnership started, how it's going, and present a few of the lessons learned along the way. Next slide, please. So alternative education. First of all, I will likely shorthand this as I go to alt-ed, and I may shorthand a few other terms. Oklahoma State Department of Education may become OSDE, and the Oklahoma Arts Council may become OAC. Just wanted to give you a heads up so that you will know what the heck I am talking about. Anyway, if you're not familiar, alternative education is a dropout prevention program for students who are at risk of not completing their high school education. Students may be referred to alt-ed programs by school counselors for a variety of reasons, including truancy, expulsion, pregnancy-related gaps in education, involvement with the juvenile justice system, and others. Many students who attend alt-ed programs have experienced homelessness, been exposed to violence or substance abuse, or survived other traumatic experiences. The legislation that created alternative education in Oklahoma was passed in 1993, and it included 17 specific criteria that alt-ed schools must meet in order to provide the additional supports that these students need. These criteria include things like smaller class sizes, individualized instruction, and access to counseling and social services. Another one of the 17 criteria is access to arts education, quote, including artist residencies provided by the Oklahoma Arts Council, end quote. We were fortunate to have a state senator who was a tireless champion of arts education throughout her legislative career, and she worked with our then director to add that language to the bill. Initially, after the bill was passed, OSDE provided our agency with funding, which we re-granted to schools. From the mid-1990s until 2010, our agency worked with dozens of alt-ed sites each year, and we had one of the largest programs of this type in the country, receiving national recognition for our positive outcomes. However, in 2010, the superintendent ended the funding for this program, and because at that time, our agency's funding was also starting to decline, we were no longer able to fund these programs, and we had to end the program abruptly. Next slide, please. 4 years later, in 2014, the OSDE offered a new funding opportunity called the Competitive Grant Pool. OSDE had different leadership, and we decided to apply for this in order to revive arts and alternative education. In our application, we addressed the goals of OSDE, which at that time were fully focused on college and career readiness. This was pre-ESSA, so there was no language about well-rounded education, well-rounded students at that point in time. We also addressed how we would meet goals that were important to alternative education, like the number of students earning credits so that they could either graduate or transition back to traditional high schools. We addressed these concepts as much as possible while also keeping our agency goals top of mind, expanding meaningful access to the arts for more Oklahomans. The crux of our application was identifying the intersections of these goals. We showed that we were prepared and committed to reach these goals, and because of our program history, we could offer the documented results to prove it. We submitted an application to this competitive grant pool for $200,000, more than we'd received in any other single year of the previous version of the program, and we were awarded the whole amount. Hooray! Next slide, please. Now it was time to get to work. Once we were notified of our award, we developed our new grant application and included questions asking directly about the goals that we said we were going to address through this grant. Not only does this help us see if these programs are actually meeting the goals that we established, it also provides us with great case-making language going forward for maybe other grants, for legislators, new school directors, and other decision makers. As you can see, pretty strong results. 91% of respondents said that this program led directly to a greater likelihood of completing school. 94% noticed increased student attendance. And anecdotally, this is probably the thing that I hear the most often from school directors when I talk to them. They will tell me that on the days that the artist comes, the students attend. And usually when they do, they tend to stay for the whole day, for, in all of the content areas. So I really hear this a lot, that the artist program leads to increased attendance. And 100% said that students learned new skills, displayed positive changes in their behavior, and improved their ability to set and achieve goals, all due to their participation in this project. I've mentioned documenting results a few times. As you can see, our grant system has been crucial for that, and any grant system can be a great tool to achieve that goal. Next slide, please. So in addition to those questions, those kind of checkbox questions, final report narratives can also provide us with great evidence about program impact. I won't read the entire slide to you, but I do want to hit some of the high points. So these are some comments from one of our most consistent participants. Her school serves a co-op of 7 small districts in rural Comanche County, which is in the southwest part of our state. So you see here, there was an opening night artist reception. Fame was the smallest school with art on display, but we had the most students and guests who attended. It was even attended by the mayor of Duncan and state legislators. Many of our students come to us with negative school experiences. Fame changes these negatives to a positive, and art is a large part of this transformation. So very strong testimony there. Next slide, please. This is a site that doesn't apply as often, but I really love these observations. Again, I'll just read part of it. Students grew in confidence as they learned the skills and were able to show this through the photographs taken each week. This confidence continued over into other subject areas. Therefore, the participants completed more credits than usual, allowing them to be ahead of pace or to graduate or to be ahead of pace to graduate next year. So very strong statements of impact there. Next slide, please. So the competitive grant pool award was renewed for a second year, but after that program ended as well. This time, however, our agency was in a little bit of a better place, and we were able to allocate funding for it to continue. That commitment really helped to strengthen our partnership even more. An important part of this partnership has been building trust by being consistent and being present for alt-ed events. This kind of echoes some of the comments that Michael was saying about being a consistent partner throughout. Attending annual regional meetings, for example, this is a great time for us to get the word out about our grant opportunities, but these meetings are also a great time to hear from school directors as they report on their own innovative success stories and on their specific challenges. It's also a great time to make connections, meet people, and just talk to people, get to know them a little bit. A few years ago, our agency was invited to participate in an alt-ed advisory group that was tasked with revising the original 1993 law. Because of our agency's participation in the alt-ed task force, we were able to get a key phrase added to the requirement for the arts: hands-on. So now students will experience the arts in a much deeper way. Prior to that, completing an art history course online was another acceptable way of completing that arts credit. So offering them the ability to experience the arts hands-on offers them an experience with a lot more impact and a lot more benefit for them. So I have no doubt that our history of working well with alt-ed led to the invitation to join this group, which in turn led to positive developments for students across the states. Next slide, please. Last school year, OSDE announced a new grant opportunity through federal ARP ESSER funding. Their request for proposals came with specific goals, addressing learning loss due to gaps in education and re-engaging students in school climate. While these were pandemic-related goals, they're also inherent goals for the structure of alt-ed programs. Pandemic or no, most alt-ed students have experienced gaps in their education, and they need some support as they try to re-engage in those classroom settings. So with nearly 3 decades of working with alternative education school sites under our belts and documented positive results, we already knew that we could do this. We had the language and the results to prove that we could deliver. We submitted an ambitious proposal and were granted a little more than $300,000 with a possibility for a 1-year extension. This allows us to grow our services from 1 to 3 funding streams specifically for alt-ed schools. So one of those is an expansion of our original alt-ed grant. Another one is a brand new performing arts experience grant. And the third one is a community partnership grant. They all kind of work a little bit differently and have slightly different goals. This funding will allow us to hire a part-time person. And we're knee deep in that hiring process as we speak. Next slide, please. So as you can see, there've been lots of ups and downs with this, but if I can offer anything helpful from our experience, there's a few things. I talked about identifying common goals. We've had partnerships and worked with the fine arts department at OSDE, but when we were working with the alt-ed department, the value of arts education in itself wasn't always a given when we would talk to folks. So we found lots of ways that our goals overlapped with their goals, and that's the language, that's where we focused our messaging. Document everything. If you have a goal, you can develop a mechanism to measure it. I believe that. I know we all know lots about arts assessment in the arts education world. And if you're giving away grants, as I mentioned earlier, you've got some built-in assessment tools that you can really put to work for you to help you capture some case-making language. Be consistent and show up. This program has had lots of changes in funding and structure, but we've stayed in open communication with the alt-ed staff, and that has gone a long way to building trust. Be open to feedback. There was a few years when we first started to work with alt-ed, when I first started to work, and I think I came in to do these presentations, and I came in kind of hot, giving them sort of a hard sell on our grants. And I went way in depth about the application process instead of listening first to what was already happening. I got some feedback that I might be overloading the attendees with details that they didn't really need at that time, and that my presentation wasn't really landing. So I adjusted my approach, and it's really made a huge difference. So now whenever I go and speak, there's a lot more engagement and a lot more discussion, and I'm really grateful that someone, felt comfortable to give me that nudge because I needed it. So to make a long story short, too late, these approaches have allowed our agencies to build a strong and mutually beneficial partnership that has weathered a whole lot of change. And we are continuing to develop new aspects of this work. This next upcoming year will be a little bit of a heavy lift as we get all 3 of those grants out the door and rolling, but it's exciting work. And we can't see where this partnership goes from here. Next slide, please. So there's my contact information, and that is it for me. So thanks, and I will turn the floor to David in South Carolina. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. David, you are up next.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm going to share a screen with you all as well. Good afternoon or good morning, depending upon where you are in the United States or beyond. Just want to say, give a one item is that I've got a full construction project going on outside this door. So power drills have been going off, saws, and all kinds of things. And I mentioned that to Eric, and he said, well, that just goes to prove that we're building partnerships and we're adding the sound effects to this presentation. So I just want to give a little bit of an update there if you happen to hear some noise in the background. I'm the executive director of the South Carolina Arts Commission, and I'm here to talk about a program that we have grown and we've dubbed Arts Grow SC. Arts Grow SC is a program that exists between the South Carolina Arts Commission and the South Carolina Department of Education. Take a moment there to check out the website if you have an opportunity at artsgrowsc.org. Not getting my slides to advance. There we go. So Arts Grow SC is a statewide initiative that is to advance arts and education throughout South Carolina following a collective impact model. If you're not familiar with the collective impact model, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in a little bit, but it's kind of self-explanatory in saying what it is, that collectively people coming together to make the change. That's the model that we're incorporating here, the goals that are part of this initiative. And the goals of Arts Grow SC are to increase access to a quality arts education, to develop really arts-rich learning environments, and to build and support infrastructure for arts learning at the district levels, and then research and develop new innovative practices. So a little bit of history about this funding. So you see that in March of 2021, you can see that it came through the American Rescue Plan. Originally $122 billion that is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. That's what's ESSER 3. And of that funding, 2.1 billion came to South Carolina. So as an immediate process there, straight from the State Department of Education, 90% of those funds went directly to the districts, which that's $1.9 billion that went to districts to receive based on Title I allocations. 10%, which is still a large amount, $210 million, the South Carolina Department of Education distributed it for state level activities of their choosing. And so we saw that as an opportunity. And when we saw that they had those funds and could decide exactly what they were going to do with them, we decided that we would go to them and pitch the idea that we could be a part of the solution for this funding and how we might address learning and learning loss as a result of COVID. So they heard our pitch and they liked the idea, and they came along and presented us in a partnership grant with $20 million for arts education that we turned into a program we're calling Arts Grow SC. And we received those funds through September of 2024. So it's a 3-year grant project. $10 million of the funds go towards learning loss. $5 million are to address that in after-school programming, and $5 million to address that in summer. So in 2022, May of 2022, a permanent status was collected together, and that collective impact model, and we created something called the Spearman Center for Arts Innovation, and that was just launched. And we're excited about that. That center will be actually downstairs in the building that I'm currently in. So at the South Carolina Arts Commission, it will serve as the headquarters for Arts Grow SC. Partners. So this is really where the rubber meets the road. I call this that the stars just happened to align for us, because we happened to be in a situation where we had some pilot projects already running in education across the state of South Carolina. And we had some other initiatives that had been longstanding around arts-rich learning environments. We call them ABC schools. And you see one of the partnerships listed here is the ABC project in partnership with us, the State Department, and Winthrop University. But these partners came together, and we sort of called them together into this collective impact model that we keep referring to. We didn't start with this many. It's grown to this many just in 1 year. So it's pretty exciting, considering the fact that, you know, the funding, the idea wasn't accepted until July of last year. And then we didn't actually receive the funds until like September, October of last year. And so the first 6 months truly were trying to get this thing launched and to build it and decide exactly what it was going to look like. So in the last 6 months of last year is when we really started to grow these partnerships, and people started joining us and getting on board in order to do this work together across the entire state. I think it's important that we continue to talk about evidence-based research, and we provide this on our website. We provide the evidence that schools can look to and incorporate and justify the programming that they want to do in conjunction with us, that we want to be able to say what we're doing is proven, tried, and true. And so we actually do the research for you, for the schools that need to justify it or to talk about it, and we drop that on our website. Programs and services. So this is the way we look about doing the work across the spectrum with all those key partners. So you'll see that we focus on grants. We have direct programs from local, regional, and statewide partners. We do professional learning. We have hub coordinators, and that's still kind of growing. That is a sort of a long-term goal as to where this work will eventually go. Resource network and distribution. So we provide a resource of networks for arts educators, for teaching artists, and for arts coordinators across the state. And then to be able to distribute information and materials and supplies even. We look to make sure that we create some new and innovative arts programs. So we want to be a developer of new ideas, of things that maybe we haven't actually had in this state. And then virtual teaching and learning, so that no matter where you are geographically located, you will have an opportunity to participate in professional learning, or your students can participate in learning. And then research and policy hub. So that's an important piece of this as well, because at the end of this 3-year, $20 million investment, we want to have research that we can use for us and hopefully across this nation that say, look, this is the impact that happens when there's a large investment in arts education and the difference that it can make to learning in the arts and learning across other subject areas. A statewide dissemination. So Arts Grow SC follows, again, that collective impact model with the South Carolina Arts Commission. We're serving as the backbone for that work. Collective impact is a network of community members, organizations, institutions who advance equity by learning together, aligning, and integrating their actions to achieve population and systems level change. So, we're excited about this as a focus. We feel like that it speaks to the mission of the Arts Commission here and the mission for arts education that we hold as well. This creates a model for sustainability. So that's the key piece here, is that we have to figure out if we're going to grow this and we're going to build it out with this funds and it ends in 3 years at the end of the 3rd year, how do we sustain this? How do we activate the strengths of the South Carolina Department of Education, the Arts Commission, our partnering organizations, all those schools and districts that are out there as well? So statewide dissemination. In the coming years, Arts Grow SC will follow a hub approach in 3 ways. First, we will use already existing education consortiums across the state of South Carolina. There are groups of districts that already collectively define themselves as a consortium, and we feel like that we can capitalize on the fact that they exist and communicate and share things like professional learning and resources. We also are looking at districts that already share resources. There are small districts in this state that they already look to each other, and sometimes they share a music teacher or a band director or a theater teacher. Sometimes they share the fact that they have professional learning that's happening in one place and they share it in the neighboring district. So we want to capitalize on those relationships that already exist. And then there are places across the state that don't really have that consortium network active, or they don't have that sort of natural fit where they're working together. We want to be the creator of a hub if we need to bring our arts coordinators, our education leaders, our teaching artists together in those areas and let them begin to see how they can work together to do important work in arts education. So these hubs will push programs and services throughout South Carolina. Our flagship location, again, is here in South Carolina in Columbia, and it's titled the Spearman Center for Arts Innovation, right downstairs below me. Moving forward, hub locations. They will be in places like school district offices, already existing consortium sites, maybe foundations, private companies, cities and governments, or nonprofit and grantees. Long-term funding. So here's where we're looking towards, like, how do we do this beyond just this 3-year investment. Our Education Improvement Act, we were going after those funds specifically to address these programs that we're developing. Those funds are set aside specifically for education in South Carolina. Our South Carolina Arts Commission's general state funds can be allocated towards that. National endowment funds, the South Carolina Department of Education, they have funds for professional learning that we can hopefully get funneled in this direction for sustainability. Our governor's office has a literacy initiative, our education oversight. These are just to name a few, honestly. So you can see the others, and that's what we're going to go after to try to look at this beyond the 3rd-year mark. So here's a map. I think it's a good visual. Sometimes we need visuals to be able to kind of see what we've been able to do. So this map shows what happened in year 1. So like I said, the first 6 months really didn't even count. This just represents programs that we were able to get up and running and grants from January through June 30th, pretty much. We did the planning before that, but really as far as the rubber meeting the road, these were the programs that we were able to get to in year 1. We are currently in year 2, starting July 1st, this past July. And the next slide will show you where we hope to be by the end of June of next year. So you see there's more. So we continue to add partners. We continue to add programming. We're targeting districts and schools that oftentimes don't even have an arts teacher available to them. We're bringing summer learning in the arts. We're bringing after school learning. We're working with things like Boys and Girls Clubs, who we've actually formed new partnerships with to create new curriculum that will actually be arts rich. We're excited about those kinds of opportunities. And this kind of comes to an end, but I wanted you to see kind of collectively how it kind of all comes together. But I hope you will take a moment, go to artsgrowsc.org and see what we have going on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That was great. And thank you again, Michael, Jennifer, for your presentations. We're going to transition into our Q&A period now. We have about 20 minutes left in the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into chat. I'm actually going to start this off with a question for all 3 of you. Since Michael hasn't gotten to speak in a while, I'm going to start with him. So the question for you all 3 is, looking forward, kind of what are your goals with your partnership and program after this current funding ends? How would you like it to continue to grow, or do you see it sunsetting at some point or changing into something different? Michael?
Well, this was a one-time grant opportunity, but we hope that it's the genesis of more such one-time opportunities with budget surpluses that our state has amassed. And the fact is that we do play well with others. And so we hope that they will look to us again to distribute such things. But the fact is that the governor is placing a very high priority on the education infrastructure. And because we're able to demonstrate that arts education infrastructure is a part of that overall education infrastructure, and we had the opportunity to invest in rural districts, we hope that whether it's just arts or across the curriculum, we'll see significant increases in arts education spending across, especially into lower resource districts such as rural Idaho.
Great. Thank you, Michael. That makes a lot of sense. Since it was a limited one-time funding opportunity, kind of planning on using that to leverage and set up further opportunities within that relationship and other partnerships makes a ton of sense to me. Jennifer, how about you? Where do you envision your program going forward?
Yeah, well, so as I mentioned, we've had a few ups and downs over the years as different funding sources have kind of come and gone. Our kind of flagship arts and alternative education grant that pays for artists and residents, that kind of thing, I think we'll continue that in some form or fashion, no matter what happens. We may have, also this funding comes with a possibility of a 1-year extension. So we might have it for 2 years. We just don't know yet. But after all that is expended and done, we'll still keep that in some form or fashion. If we don't have a separate pot of funding for that. We can use our other school grant funding for alt-ed. As far as the other two grants, they're very new, so really I don't know what will become of those. The performing arts grant is something that has been kind of, I've seen a lot of interest in that expressed by schools, not just alt-ed schools, but traditional schools as well, having an artist come in to either lead a performance or take students to a performance. And so I think I'll just, we might just kind of track what the impact of this is. And then, if it seems to make sense to continue it, we might explore that possibility, but it's kind of too soon to say since we haven't even offered it yet. And the third grant that we're offering is a community art partnership grant, and it works a little differently. So it's for arts-based nonprofits to apply for us to provide services for alt-ed schools. And I'm hoping that what comes out of that is just an increased interest in the organizations we work with all over the state, working with the alt-ed schools that are in their own backyard that might kind of get overlooked for programming. And I'm hoping that this kind of leads to some continued partnerships that, may exist without us, or, they may go on and find a really good niche between a certain group and a certain school. So, but since those two haven't really started yet, we're just going to wait and see what the results are and take it from there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like once you kind of, as you mentioned in your presentation, once you can kind of show some of the results and have a little more information in your back pocket, maybe that involves either trying to look for continuing funding for those programs or adapting those programs to something else that you're looking for, something that's a little more targeted or broader or some helpful answer. It makes perfect sense. Thank you, Jennifer. David, it sounds like you have funding for 3 years and a very ambitious project during those 3 years, but have you started thinking about what it will look like after that 3-year period?
Absolutely. From the very beginning, talked about the sustainability of what we're actually going to build. I mean, it's a lot of funding and it's a lot to build to just have it be pulled away. We think that building a research component into this model with this funding so that at the end of that we can have some data that we can, like Jennifer, you were talking about, build that in so that we can actually show what the impact is and the difference that it has made and how it has engaged students in learning. We think that will speak to other funders and the other people with funds, in other words, across the state that believe in this work as well. And so, really kind of making sure that we're thinking ahead, that even what we're doing has a lasting component to it. So, we work with South Carolina Public Television to create learning videos for teachers so that those will have, longevity well beyond the life of the grant. So we were looking for some specific ways that we could do some things that, would exist beyond just like direct programming. So that's one thing we're doing. And then we've got that list of where we're going to talk about, where else can we get that money and that investment.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. That makes a lot of sense. Because with the extent and the amount of work you're doing, 3 years seems like a very short amount of time to have the impact that you're hoping for. So it's good to hear that you're kind of planning that out. Michael, I think I saw you raise your hand real quick.
Yes, a very brief little addition, because I spoke to sustaining funding and such, but let me emphasize that the relationships over time are actually as important, if not more important, than achieving an initial new funding prospect. We've heard over years that from legislators that when we go before them for legislative testimony, that while they constantly deal with the problems of the state, here we come and speak to them about something that's going right. We never whine, we never complain. And at one point, I even spoke to them to say, when there were budget problems, I said, listen, we'll just be creative. If we can't be creative, I don't know who. We'll be creative in everything except the accounting. And that got a lot of chuckles in the room. But they generally have a good feeling about us. And this was able to take on a very high profile thing that was in the governor's agenda and make it a success. And whether that pays off next year or the year after, I don't know. But it does pay off in the relationships that we build and maintain with our authorizers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Michael, that it is, as you mentioned in your presentation, it's about the relationships, it's about being seen as the well-loved, respected, and reliable, group that you are, which makes approaching you for partnerships or talking to you for other things like budget or whatever much easier, puts you on stronger footing, and makes it harder for them to cut your money too if they like you. I have another question here that came through chat from Julie Hale in Missouri. This one's specifically for Jennifer. Jennifer, Julie wanted to know more about the artists who deliver instruction in the alt ed schools. Does your agency select the teaching artists? She wants to kind of know a little bit about the qualifications that are sought for that, any necessary preparation or qualifications of those teaching artists.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Julie. And hello, Julie, one of my Mid-America colleagues in my region. So we do not select the artists for the schools. We leave that decision up to schools and to the artists. We do have a teaching artist roster, and that's the first place that I will refer schools to find a teaching artist is that roster. We've got about 50 different artists with different disciplines. And one of the things that artists can put on their bio is different communities and different age ranges that they work with, early childhood, teens. So, if they have selected working with high school students, and, then a school might, be more likely to reach out to them for that reason. We also, after we received the funding in 2014, through the competitive grant pool, we did offer a training for teaching artists and for alt ed sites. The goal was to do a little matchmaking, and we had some of the site directors there and also teaching artists there to kind of give folks a chance to interact a little bit, because that's one of the questions that I do get from school directors is, how do we find an artist? So if there's not an artist on our roster who's available, there are some other options. We do have a network of our grantees across the state. We also work with tribes and with higher ed institutions, and we can help them connect with artists through some of these other folks that we work with who are have presences in these communities. But we have offered trainings in the past, and this is something that now that we're able to convene groups again, we might continue to do that in the future. But by and large, we just kind of leave that decision to the artist and the site. So.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And I have one more kind of back pocket question to ask all three of you that I think would be beneficial for those of us on the phone. Do you have any one or two pieces of practical advice on how you can approach and strengthen partnerships with your state boards of education or departments of education? David, you've been the longest without speaking, so I'm going to go to you first this time.
Practical advice. That's interesting. And I think I would second what Michael talked about with relationship building. And I think that is key, and I think that's very important. Now, I would say in our situation, stars aligned. They really did. It just so happens that the superintendent for education here in South Carolina currently is a former music teacher. That helps, right? So she spoke the language once I met with her. So I would say, but I had a relationship with her too. I mean, it's not like that. It's not like we just showed up and we had never ever talked. So I would say, build a relationship, forge a relationship with someone, or find someone who's receptive to building a relationship with and for you. I think sometimes you have friends who will open the door for you. So, and sometimes they are people that you just don't expect or suspect. So I think that would be one piece of advice that I would give.
Great. Thank you, David. And Michael, since David probably stole your answer, do you have anything to add to that?
What he said.
Perfect. Jennifer, how about you?
I would kind of go back to the advice that I gave in the one of the final slides, but I think a really big one for us was like learning to speak language that made sense to the audience. Even though we had worked with the fine arts department and we had a great relationship there, with a large institution like the Department of Education, there's so much specialization, or some people might call it siloing, that it's sometimes you need to use totally different communication tactics and really find out what's important to the people that you're working with, and try to see, okay, well, how is our work meeting that goal, and how can we do more of meeting that goal while still staying true to our own mission. So speaking their language was one, finding again those common goals. And just to echo what Michael and David said, just being there and being reliable, and just show up and do what you say you will. And that really goes a long way toward building trust, I think.
Hey, Eric, since I stole Michael's, can I give a different one too?
Sure.
I will say that something that was really beneficial for us in the funding that we received was that we had already created several pilot projects around arts education, and that we were trying some things in some rural parts of South Carolina that we were hoping to get good results. And actually, after 2 or 3 years, we were getting good responsive and feedback and positive results. We partnered with a university and a governor's school for the arts, and did some summer reading camps as a pilot project. And then we worked with another organization to try to replicate what they were doing in a city and replicate that in a more rural community. So we had 2 pilots running, and we had our Arts Rich Schools program, the ABC project. And so when the funding became available, we were able to say we could take these that are already existing and scale them up. So they were there and ready to go. We just were waiting for an opportunity. So I would say, don't be afraid to try something different, and put it out there as a pilot. And if it succeeds, great. And if it doesn't, you try.
Great. I think those are 3 really solid pieces of advice. 1, build trusting relationships with people that you may want to partner with or you have common goals with. That learn to speak the language of the people you want to be partners with, like figuring out, how they talk about things. I bet you'll find more alignment once you know what they're saying and they know what you're saying. And I like this idea of not being afraid and to jump on opportunities when they present themselves, and finding it. So I think those are 3 great pieces of advice. We only have 3 minutes left, so I think I'm going to call it a session. I want to thank David, Michael, Jennifer. This was great. I really enjoyed your presentations. I thought they were super meaty, had a lot there. Thank you so much for answering our questions. I'm going to throw out a quick poll, if you would. It'll just help me keep building learning series sessions like this one, and let me know who's showing up. And I'm hoping to see you all in Kansas City in just a month for the assembly. Really looking forward to that. We've got strong turnout and some great sessions. If you haven't checked it out, please jump on the conference website and check it out. We're coming up to online registration ends on September 5th, so make sure to get registered as soon as possible. And again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Michael, David, Jennifer, one last time for great presentations, and I hope to see you all soon.